when we kind of consider the notion that aliens would come here and speak to our leaders, so to speak, we consider that purely because we use our mindset to try and understand how they would act, instead of realizing that they're truly alien. You know, Paul's quite right. We're all just 6 billion people. Nobody from out there, if they're truly advanced, is going to care. We only think of it because that's the way our minds work. Well, this is the president, that's the prime minister, that's the king, that's the queen. They're obviously going to come down and meet them. Well, why? Because that's how we think. And the problem is, ufology is caught up in that mindset of having rigid ideas and belief systems throughout ufology. You know, the aliens crashed in 47. They're abducting people because their race is on the biological downside. You know, there's dead aliens and crashed UFOs at Area 51. Flying triangles are back-engineered UFOs, etc., etc. It goes on, and they're not theories anymore. And ufology, you know, uses this same approach of using the logical way our brains work to try and fit all this into a scenario, and that's all it is. You know, in the take me to your leader idea, it's a scenario, but it's our scenario because it's the best we can come up with.
I wouldn't even say it's the logical way. I agree with you, but I wouldn't even say it's the logical way our brains work. I would say perhaps it's the illogical way, the terribly limited way our brains look at the universe. We stuck it all into a teeny tiny little box, and you know, maybe what the aliens, whatever they are saying, hey, you guys got to crawl out of the box and start thinking about things in a different way. And so when Greg says, you know, maybe they're trying to lead us to something. Maybe that's what they're trying to lead us to, which starts to sound, Greg, let me throw this to you, because some people will criticize this line of thought as being almost quasi-religious, that you guys have drifted off the scientific reservation and you're basically talking about religion now. You're no different than born-again Christians or something. This idea that there's an intelligence that's trying to lead us somewhere. Do you think maybe we're drifting too far into faith-based ufology, Greg? Is that a concern that the ETH people often level at folks like us?
If you've been in the UFO field for a while, a lot of the stuff people talk about starts to sound sort of religious, because you start running into that. You start running into government stuff, you start running into psychology, you start running into spirituality. And I don't think there's any reason to shy away from that, because we're dealing with people, you know, with their psychology, with their belief systems, with whatever their wants and needs and cultural background is. And if that includes, you know, their spiritual beliefs, so be it. The other thing I was thinking when you were talking about, we were talking about all the whatever these entities are, wherever they come from, and they didn't see any, you know, they don't care who, you know, what people's position is. What we've learned about the UFO subject and about witnesses is that anybody can witness a UFO. It's not limited to an economic or social or even by country or nationality or anything. And so I think that if there is an intelligence, which I think there is behind the paranormal, behind the UFO subject, it's so democratic, it's almost out of our realm of belief of how democratic it is.
Just to go back to Paul's point about, you know, about drifting towards a religion and, you know, are we any different to a preacher? I actually think we are. I think we're the exact opposite, because a preacher, whatever his or her religion is, their role basically is to uphold that belief system, whereas we, I think, are questioning belief systems. We're not denying the existence of something, but we're not hammering home, you know, the idea that it's this or it's that. And I think that's the important point, that a lot of people in ufology, you know, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, because I'm certainly not, but I do hope that I have an open mind rather than a mind that has already reached a conclusion and that is determined to uphold it come high water or whatever. You know, I think this is the important thing, that ufology, there is an argument for saying that certain aspects of ufology do spill over into religion in terms of the approach, but it is very much based around upholding belief systems, etc. And I think there are people in ufology who do that, consciously or otherwise, but I would hope that more people would come around to the idea eventually that we can look at the idea, as I do believe, that there's a genuine phenomenon without having to, you know, hammer home the point that it's that it's explanation A, B, or C, etc.
If you view ufology as, in some sense, a religion, but also in some sense, say, call it a spiritual or quest or whatever, you guys are more in the spiritual quest end of it, where you're asking questions, you're out there, you're mystics. It happens to be in the UFO field as opposed to religion, but whatever, or faith. And that exists in almost every inquiry of humans looking into something that we don't understand, certainly with spirituality or faith. There are mystics, William James, a whole bunch, Henry Allen was one. Jesus himself, one would say, was very mystical. And then there's the people who come along and insist on taking that mysticism, that wonder, that questioning, and taking everything special out of it. You know, like sticking a pin in it, draining the lifeblood out of it, and then leaving a cold, dark gray husk. And, oh, okay, that's what we've got because we can control that.
I think the problem is in any of these things, any of these pursuits, if you want to get down to brass tacks, I suppose, and I've written about this and so has Nick, is fundamentalist thinking, the belief-based thinking, which stops you looking at other things. What could be more boring than to be stuck in one type of thought process, one belief system, and then sit there and defend it against all people who you know once in a while have a good point? I think that's boring, and it's also it's cowardly to me. So I distinguish skeptics in the UFO field and any other field by two terms: skeptic, which is somebody that doesn't believe anything without proper evidence to back it up, and a fundamentalist skeptic who won't believe anything no matter how much evidence you show them.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, too, and I swear this is the last thing I'll read from Mac's book, but I want people to, why I'm doing this is I want them to hear what he wrote and understand that there are very few people writing in the UFO field or the paranormal field in general that also had a facility with language that Mac had. And that's what we'll miss. And here's his final comment in the book. He leaves the cryptoterrestrials behind, and he goes back to talking about us. And I think a lot of what Mac's thinking on all of this was that we see in the UFO phenomenon a mirror of ourselves. Perhaps it says as much about us as it says about whatever they are. So here's what he wrote. He said, although I harbor serious reservations about humanity's ability to make the evolutionary cut, I'm not without hope. I sense great things in the making. I enjoy experiencing this dire, ever-accelerating point in our species' history. Our potential as genuine cosmic citizens challenges the imagination and stretches conceptual boundaries to dizzy extremes. I'm willing to embrace transcendence or endure extinction. I must perpetually concede either possibility, no matter how dramatically different, regardless of how exciting or dismal. I walk a fine existential edge, fearing and cherishing, enlivened by a vertiginous sense of astonishment and horror. And I would say that there's no better way of looking at the UFO phenomenon than those. He wasn't specifically writing about ufology, but the UFO phenomenon, those two paragraphs, you know, the idea of you're looking at it in both horror but also fascination, a mystery, all of that stuff. I think it's so sad because he really was somebody who was capable of exciting people's imagination again. So many people have been so certain for so long about what the UFO phenomenon represents that to paraphrase the Joker from Tim Burton's Batman, what this thing needs is an enema, and what the cryptoterrestrials is the enema. It is that trumpet blast that says, you know, we can't be certain about anything, which doesn't mean we're chickens with our heads cut off running around just willy-nilly saying this, that, and the other thing. Let's focus in. Let's ask questions again. Maybe those questions will eventually lead us to answers, but we have to admit that after 60 years, we don't have those answers yet. And we're really no closer than we were in 1948. And I think that's the point of what he was doing with the cryptoterrestrials, encouraging people to think again and to look for answers again.